So I would like to invite Professor Susan McKenney from Twente University to lecture on RPPs, characteristics, expectations, and infrastructure. So thank you.
Thank you. And shalom, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today. Let me see if I can get the screen sharing to work the way it's supposed to. Do you see a presentation? Yes? All right. So great. Yeah, it's really exciting to be here with you. I'm coming to you from, well, actually from my home in the Netherlands, where I work at the University of Twente. I don't know how much you know about the university, and of course we don't have time to go into great detail, but I love it here because it's beautiful and green and we have a fabulous campus, but also because it's a place where we work really hard to break new scientific ground and at the same time to serve society. The things I'd like to discuss with you today have to do with the 4 main goals. I'm hoping to offer you some food for thought for this important work that you are doing in trying to understand and support educational RPPs. I've centered my contribution for today around the questions that I understand that your group is actually tackling. So I'll talk a little bit about RPP characteristics, the contributions of different partners, as well as what they get out of it, some recommendations for actions to support RPPs, and then also a little bit of talk about the infrastructure or the necessary conditions that can foster RPP success. I have a little disclaimer for you. This is sort of a habit of mine, is to have very information dense slides. This is because, well, first of all, we have a topic that is super deep and rich, and I couldn't possibly put it all into 15 minutes of talking, but more importantly, I thought you might want to revisit some of the ideas in more depth later, or maybe you'd like to visualize some of the connections with the chapters that I sent ahead. So there's going to be more on the screen than I touch on. We can talk about that at the end. I'll try to save some time for that too, but they're meant as a take-home resource. So I hope you like it. Let's dive straight in with characteristics of RPPs. And I can see you, but you're really small. So if I'm going too fast, or if you need to stop me for a question, please grab the mic and pull it up real close.
I'm grabbing one.
Stop, McKenney, stop.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we are hearing a little bit with echo, and I think we'll associate it.
I don't know if it's going to change anything if I put on my earphones, but let's give that a try.
It's fine. Just if you can speak a little bit slowly, because we understand very fast when we talk slowly.
I'll do my best. I don't know if this helps at all with the echo. It's about all I got.
It's much better now, actually. Yeah, and we have the technical person here helping with us with the echo too. And I wanted to say something to everybody here, that since I know Susan, I know you like to interact. Is that right?
I like to what?
To interact with people and not
yes.
Just, so will you be happy if we stop you and say something, or would you like to give your talk and then discuss?
It's all up. This is your party. I'm just a guest, so I will do whatever works for you.
Okay. So, but please, אני רוצה להגיד לכולם, I'm talking Hebrew for a second. תרגישו נוח, באמת, אם אתם רוצים רגע לעצור ולשאול או לחשוב או להעיר, תעשו את זה, כי אני חושבת שזה, we will make more of this talk if it becomes a discussion. So, yep, we can start. Thanks.
All right. So the first thing has to do with the characteristics of RPPs. I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot here that's new to you, but maybe just some important ways of looking, I think. First of all, we know that we're talking about long-term, mutually beneficial collaborations. The 2 main reasons for doing these things have to do with either knowledge use, like the dissemination and uptake of research findings, or knowledge production, like we create new knowledge, which eventually then gets disseminated and taken up and used, we hope. Those are the two main reasons for having RPPs in the history that I've heard of them. Especially in recent years, the combination of those two things is really important. They're special for a lot of reasons. These are the reasons that brought you into this room. I don't think there's anything on here that's a surprise to you guys. One of the things that I think is really helpful when I think about RPPs, though, is to notice that while they have a lot of similar characteristics, like the ones you see here on the slide, they're also vastly diverse. Interactions in research practice partnerships have all different kinds of flavors. And if you want to understand them and support them, it really helps to understand the fact that there's a lot of variety. And despite all that variety, I think that there's four main patterns that can be identified when you look at them. Three flavors, I'll call them for now, which are highly place-based. They have to do with sort of being co-located and working face-to-face when there's no global pandemic on a regular basis, and one flavor that's much less place-based. So in this overview, I've tried to just give my current thinking on that variety. The Research Alliance is much more, in the interactions in a research alliance, the researcher really keeps the researcher role and the practitioner really keeps the practitioner role. And basically the researchers are brought in to work on a shared problem of practice, but they do their thing and the practitioners say, hey, great, thanks. It's kind of like hiring a contractor. This clinical partnership takes a step in the direction of what I think you might have seen in Yael's lovely, like, ramping up figure. Looks kind of like this in her talk not that long ago. It's kind of in the middle there, where you've got this partnership where the researcher does have the researcher role, but also is a collaborator, maybe a little bit of a consultant, and the practitioner is a collaborator, maybe a little, doing a little bit of thinking along about the research, but still staying in the core role. Then we got the co-learning agreement, where people begin to like change roles. The researcher really takes on the role of supporting practitioners in their inquiry and investigation into their own teaching and learning practice. And so that shift is much greater. Those are all three versions in the place-based set of characteristics. And then you've also got this idea of networked improvement communities, where at very different locations in different contexts, people are working on similar kinds of issues, and they're sharing out what they're finding across quick iterations of plan, do, check, act cycles. I just wanted to touch on these in terms of characteristics, because it's really important to remember that not all RPPs are alike. Even within these columns, if you will, you'll see lots of variation. But if you want to serve RPPs, you got to really think about the fact that there's this kind of variation out there. And so one thing for sure is understanding what kind of specific supports can be given to the different kinds of or types of RPP interactions. All right, let's talk a little bit about partners. One of the questions I thought you guys have been working on is, what do different partners contribute, but also what do they get out of research practice partnerships? So in terms of what they contribute, there's a little bit of the reading in the chapter that I sent you. Here's just a reminder of some of those things, but a couple of highlights. At different points in the lifespan of a partnership, or probably even more aptly said, in the lifespan of a project that takes place in a particular partnership. I think of the partnerships as being there all the time, and we have different projects that come along the way and sort of can ride on the rails of the partnership. People contribute different things at different times. I think it's helpful to remember that because when we want to support people making their contributions, we also want that to be a flexible kind of thing. If you're thinking about a design-centric partnership, which is something that I tend to do a lot, then at earlier stages, we're especially more busy thinking about what kinds of problems we're going to focus on, what context factors are super important. We have researchers often acting as consultants and practitioners often acting as problem owners. But we also have from both groups, plenty of people who can serve the role of detective, trying to figure out what's really going on and why. If we design interventions and test them out and study to see what's happening, well, researchers, practitioners, people from related organizations, intermediaries, ministry people, and so on can all serve as co-designers or consultants. Some may help with organizing, some may help with implementing. So there's a lot of things happening over the course of research practice partnership. So different people contributing different things at different times is a big thing to remember. Depending on the goal of the partnership and the people involved, they might have decided to step out of the roles that they were maybe traditionally assigned to, or at least that their original job description described. That can vary as well. Some of the things that people get out of it, the most common drivers for people to participate in any partnership, regardless of whether your primary job description is in a school or in a ministry or in a curriculum institute or as a researcher, we're a bunch of do-gooders, right? We typically just want, to serve learners. So that's what I have found to be the most important driver for any partnership. Quite a few participants are in it for their professional growth and some for personal interest. I think, though, it helps to remember that painting with a very broad brush, serving learners is the goal for most people. And then those other two goals might or might not be there for others. But knowing that people are driven by that doesn't always tell you how much or in what ways people would like to shape their interactions. And at our university a couple of years ago, we wondered about how the partner schools that we work with wanted to shape our research practice interactions. So we did this little teeny tiny study to find out what they thought. And this tells us also a little bit about what they would like to get out of it. I'll just mention it briefly. We tried to figure out about how, we wondered, like, how do you want to shape research practice collaboration? I mean, we've got partnerships with you guys. We could do a lot of different things. We already do a lot of different things. Maybe we should streamline things. Maybe we should change things. What do you think is really important? So we brought in fellow researchers, intermediaries, so people from like the National Institute for Curriculum Development, some of our testing people, some of our school support organizations, and of course we brought in school personnel, and we ran a bunch of focus groups. And during these evenings, we had lovely food, we talked a lot. We had some activities involving targeted conversation around a couple of prompts. And we also did an activity called Q-Sort, which you'd see pictured here on the screen, where people rank statements according to their priorities. And we did our analysis. I can tell you more about the data analysis if you're interested, but the things that we identified from that whole activity or set of activities, it was many evenings, was that there were two different profiles of people in our small set of our small sample. One group of people had this outcomes orientation. They wanted their research practice partnership to be practical for practitioners. And what I mean by that is they were most interested in learning about what researchers had found out and figuring out how to apply it in their own practice, and working together to develop educational resources based on research findings. Another group of people was much more interested in the synergy and the process and the interaction itself. They were really interested in having regular and deep interactions with researchers, and they wanted researchers to support their own inquiry. Everybody wanted partnerships that would yield learning for both researchers and practitioners. So that was kind of across the board. And one thing that we thought was really interesting was once we'd identified these two sort of very different sets of wishes. I mean, they don't fight with each other, but they really mean different priorities for how you use your time and your space and your resources. We tried to find out if there were any relationship with role, do the practitioners say this? Do the researchers say that? Do the men say this? Do the women say that? age, nothing. So we really concluded that the views were more associated with personal conviction than with anything that we could discern from the outside. So let's talk a little bit about actions that one could take to support research practice partnerships. I think that's one of the things that you guys are especially interested in. That's why this group has come together. First of all, I was going to give you 3 big tips, and we can talk about them in more detail if you like during our discussion. My first main tip is to accommodate variety, bearing in mind that there's different drivers for people to participate. There's different types of RPPs in terms of place or networkness, and in terms of how they structure themselves and their roles. There's also variety in terms of the way things are organized, like formally, which boundaries are being crossed, which lines are, where do we draw certain lines? So how do we like organize the RPPs? Here are 3 examples of really exciting RPPs that I've had the privilege of being involved in. Just to highlight what I mean by organizational variety. We've got a research practice partnership here being pulled by the energy of a PhD student who was working in an NGO in India and doing her PhD here at the University of Twente. And she was not the partnership, but she was the primary boundary spanner, and her work provided the context for the collaboration. Another modality was where a bunch of curriculum developers from the Lawrence Hall of Science at the University of California, Berkeley, were working on science curriculum that could also foster language development. And they were running up against the need for more robust input than they'd been able to find just in literature. And they partnered up with the Faculty of the School of Education at UC Berkeley, as well as researchers around the country. And they did it because they needed to give, or they wanted to give their work a quality boost, but they also found the need to do it for survival in terms of bringing in research projects and continuing their work. And then a third modality, there are probably more than 3, but these are 3 that I see often. A third modality here has participants from all 3 of these circles that you see here: research institute, schools, and as well as related settings. And in this modality, we had intern mentors, teachers from vocational education, higher vocational education, and researchers coming together in a consortium for improving workplace learning. So there's a lot of variety. If we really want to support RPPs, we can't talk about them like they're all one thing. We need to recognize the individual interests of the people participating. We need to recognize the wide range of organizational goals, which pull very heavily on committed employees, which we tend to have a lot of. And so that has a lot of influence on the way people think about their work and what they want to put in and get out of it. And then we have different types of partners as well. A second tip for actions that we can take to accommodate. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I want to ask a question.
Please.
Thanks. I wanted to ask about this tip to accommodate variety. How do you do that, and at what stage, at what level? I mean, you talked before about various goals, and that there are some people are target, goal-oriented, specific outcome, and some people are more process-oriented. And I think you have to, the model has to agree with the goal. So you have to have some sort of specific goal in mind when you enter the process, right? So,
well, there's different use. Do you mean you guys as a working group, or do you mean each partnership?
Sorry, we are a working group, but I'm not talking about this group. I'm talking about a process that happens, even one of those processes that you gave as an example. you need to know, I think you had a specific goal in mind when you went into the project, right?
I think for most people, the main driver is serving learners better. And if you're working in a long-term partnership, you're going to have multiple goals over time. Like if I just think about Hadini's project in India, her first goal was to figure out, where are people now and where do they want to be, right? That was the very first, that took a year to meet that goal. And so you've got these terminal goals. They're pretty big and vague, and we try to make them smart, but it can take some time. And then you've also got these interim goals, and they're going to vary for sure for each partnership. The more detailed you get, the more partnership specific things become. So my recommendation to you guys would be then to think about how you're going to accommodate variety. And that would even include in the different kinds of goals that you would choose to support or not support. Oh, thank you. I don't know if that speaks to your question.
Yes, I think so.
And as far as what you actually do, I was going to do some of that next on the infrastructure. So maybe we can come back to that again after the next slide, if that's okay. These three are very like the action under actions. What I have here more is almost like mindsets to put yourself in, things that you can do as a working group to begin to think about this stuff as a in a real detailed kind of way. Is that okay? Should I go to the next one?
Yes, sure. I think yeah, we're keeping our food for thought for the discussion afterwards. This is great. Thanks. Yeah,
Okay.
Let's continue.
All right, thanks. So the second recommendation that I have is to celebrate champions. So by that, I mean thinking about stuff like in the paper that I hope you got to see that Yael and Batsheva and I wrote together with Giri. That means thinking about how different people in different partnerships are doing fabulous work and making sure that other people can see it. Often it doesn't get seen enough. And even if it gets seen, people like don't know what to make of it. And if we showcase how people are doing a great job of defining and tailoring key processes in a partnership, regardless of what their goals are and what their actions are, everyone's going to have to figure out how to tackle it. And showing other people how excellent work is being done is motivating. It's sort of within the zone of proximal development, and it's also sharing good ideas, which can be very helpful as well. Good champions also find ways to facilitate engagement across the partnership. That's another thing that's really important to highlight so that other people can see how it can be done, and wow, that's a neat way to do it. And another thing to really showcase for others to sort of help partnership excitement self-seed and spread is looking at different productive habits of mind and helping people see, even in small ways, how things like that can have a big effect. So I guess in front of celebrating champions is just having the assumption, the very optimistic and I think realistic assumption that coming out of this, people are going to be doing great stuff. And explicitly, I would recommend putting resources and time and energy into sniffing that out and putting it on your blogs and on your websites and in your newsletters and having them come and talk about it and things like that. So that's recommendation number 2. And recommendation number 3, again, fairly broad level, is to stimulate sustainable connections. And we can come back and talk about this a little bit more in the discussion if you want, but we know quite a bit from the literature about the different kinds of connections that matter for any kind of research practice interaction, and especially in RPPs. So one thing to kind of have in mind is to pay attention to the linkage, like in what ways are connections being made, and what kinds of mechanisms are at play for enabling connections to be frequent, to be varied, to be distributed among the partnership. And the way these things work will vary for each partnership based on the context, the stakeholders, the long-term goals and the short-term goals. But the kinds of mechanisms that you see here, identification, coordination, reflection, transformation, stuff I think you might have read about. These things we find across all of that variety. So trying to look at how people are giving it, how these things are being manifested in the different contexts is something to notice and to try and stimulate. Other things to notice and try and stimulate, maybe also celebrate along with your champions, is openness, reward. There's got to be something in it for people, not just helping learners, which is usually like the long-term broad goal because we're a bunch of do-gooders, but also in the day-to-day, I have to feel like it was worth these hours of being in this workshop here and the rest of this day and yesterday. And I don't know if you got a program for tomorrow, but you got to feel like you get something out of it in the here and now, and not just a year from now or even 6 months from now. We all need to have this sense that we're on to something that matters and that's going to have, that either is having impact now or at least like tomorrow or the next day, because the closer we are to the day-to-day of schools, the more we realize that things change fast, and a kid and a teacher can't wait 6 months until something matters. They need it soon. So figuring out what small ways or large ways, where are the payoffs, and making sure that we find, maybe even in the way that we shape our research interactions, and we can talk about two-way research methods in a minute if you like, so that being in the partnership itself is already meaningful. And then in addition to that, we have this shared work that brings us a step further. And then the last one is, of course, the synergy, right? If what we are doing is tied to our core mission and our core values, then it's a no-brainer that we keep it up. If we are doing this thing that feels like this add-on or this extra out of the goodness of our heart, but it's not, it's coming out of my free time, or it's coming out of something else that I don't really have time for, we're setting people up to feel conflicted and splintered. And it's way more powerful to set things straight into the heart of the core work. And then everybody feels like they're always working on what they need to be doing. And if that's where the partnership work lies, then that's beautiful. Okay, and last but not least, the interactions, right? So the infrastructure, the necessary conditions for successful RPPs. I don't have I wish I could just give you this ta-da list. These are the ingredients you need. I'm sure if that were to happen, you wouldn't need the whole working group, but I got my favorite tips and tricks. And for me, I like to go to what infrastructure actually is. And I think of infrastructure as the aspects of context that support a certain goal. And in this case, the goal is research practice interactions, which eventually serve teaching and learning. And when I think about infrastructure, my brain is now just wired up to going to three like go-to things. I think about the people, I think about the resources, and I think about the structures. So when it comes to RPPs, the kinds of things that I think are really important to consider, I mean, there's a million things, but three that I think are super important is that we've got different layers. And most RPPs have at least these three layers. You've got the people who are doing the operational day-to-day groundwork. They're building the tools. They're carrying out the research. They're in the classrooms. They're working with teachers, and so on. Or they are teachers. So there's the doers. You've also got the leaders of the doers that might be distributed among a team fairly evenly, but usually there's somebody who's kind of paying attention to the groundwork and the bigger picture. And those leaders have a really important role. There's also people who are doing more coordination, especially at least across organizations, maybe across locations. And on occasion, you'll see that some individuals play more than one role, Most often, people have one or maximum two roles in RPPs. But when it comes to accommodating variety, one of the things you got to bear in mind is that people playing different roles need different things. And so figuring out how you can speak to those needs in a tailored way is super, because if you give every message to everybody, you make people tired because they got to filter out and figure out what's important for them. If you want to support RPPs, you figure out how you can give the different groups what they need and not more, so that you keep them focused without adding any extra cognitive load. As far as materials go, there's lots of things that people can benefit from. Two main categories to have on your radar screen are procedural support and substantive support. So people are going to really benefit from materials that tell them how to do the stuff, like the process to go through to do their work. If it's a research cycle, how do you know, what kinds of things, what does the research process look like and how should I shape it? If it's a design-centric partnership where you're going to make interventions and test them out and refine them, not everybody in the partnership has done that and knows what to expect from it. So sort of like the itinerary of how this is going to work. That's what people want when it comes to procedural support. And a lot of partnerships have to build their own. And figuring out how to do that is interesting. I can talk to you a little bit, if you like, about some research that we've done to figure out what kind of people want to be involved in figuring out the process of a design-centric partnership. I can tell you that a lot of teachers have told me they don't care. They much rather, some do, but most of them are happy to leave the procedures to somebody else. And what they really want to do is focus on the content and get in there and talk about the teaching and the learning. And that's the substantive support that I have here. That's got to do with really creating the tools, the artifacts, and the experiences that the partnership is all about. And for each of these kinds of processes that can be supported with materials, there's lots of different things that working groups like you, research, and as well as partnerships themselves can create. You can create tools, for example, to help begin to understand where are we, where do we want to go, how do we want to get there, what are our main priorities. You can support RPPs a ton by giving them examples of things that are working elsewhere. These can serve as inspiration, or like I mentioned with the champions, they can also show that other people can do it, so maybe we can. And of course, they're informative. And then you can also have prompts, guidebooks, how-to, things like that. So that can go for the processes as well as the content. So how do we design, I don't know, blended learning together in ways that are going to mitigate dropout of our learners? Well, you can have procedural support for the design trajectory and the development and implementation and evaluation. You can also have substantive support materials for thinking about aspects of blended learning that are notoriously challenging, ways of addressing them, and specific things to put in place. Last but not least, when it comes to infrastructure for RPPs, I think it's really helpful to think about the structures. Some of them are kind of hard and visible, and some of them are kind of soft and unseen. Three that are super relevant because they're always there in some form are routines, policies, and norms. So with routines, I mean stuff like what you guys have to be in this working group. There's time set aside, there's regular engagement, the communication formats are really thought about. There's some systematic, reliable way of doing things. You know from your different partners and the people in the group that I think that there's different voices being heard, maybe different levels of one organization being represented. I'm not sure about that. But the routines in a partnership are as important as the routines in a household We need to go to bed on time. We need to eat food at roughly the same time. Yes, it's fun to shake it up once in a while, but if we don't have a regular way of working, we'll expend a lot of effort in shaping our day-to-day, and that's wasted energy, wasted time, wasted money. Or put more half full, we can really make the most out of what we have if we rely on solid routines. It usually takes a partnership a while to figure that out, but by having good people in charge of helping to think through how to structure them and giving nice examples of successful stories or tools, that can also help just in building the routines. Policies matter. And the policy within, for example, a school that allocates time or access to other teachers at the same time that I have time, or rewards me for being in a partnership and being actively engaged, or whatever, those policies matter. In a research institution, when researchers are recognized and rewarded for their outreach activity, especially if it's not connected to something that they can publish or get rewarded for when their researcher hat is on, those policies matter. In an organization that is a support institute or a ministry, figuring out how the staff are going to be allocated the opportunity to spend time in the fields when normally they're at their desks or their computers online. Those policies all really matter. Policies can help us feel like we're doing what we're supposed to do, as opposed to stealing time from our core business in order to work on this thing that we care about in our heart. Last but not least, there's the less visible but ever so present norm, right? The culture of what it means to be in a partnership or to be engaged in a partnership. If we say to our researchers, this is part of your core business, and we socially reinforce that by showing how often we're doing it and celebrating our successes and talking about it, that can really help. If we're working on a project within an RPP, we have norms as well. An RPP is served by this culture of being open-minded, of feeling like, yes, we can, but also of being willing and able and comfortable and safe in being honest, being able to offer critique, receive critique, and know that it's not about something personal, it's about this goal that we have. So that's not something that just sort of automatically happens. Like the climate in a classroom, the norms and the climate in an RPP are cultivated by the people who are there. So if we think mindfully about who we put into which positions, we can also shape that to some extent. I think there's a lot more that I could say about each of these things, but I know that I want to be mindful of our time. So maybe now's a good time for me to turn off the slides and we talk.
Great, thank you very much. אתם יכולים לשאול גם בעברית וגם באנגלית. אנחנו נפתח.
I hope I wasn't supposed to hear any of that because I got none.
It was just instructions telling you where to go. Susan, thank you so much. That was very enlightening. I really appreciated everything you said. I'm trying to connect some of the discussions that were going on here yesterday with what you just presented. And Josh Glazer spoke and advocated strongly that RPPs should operate at a level that's beyond schools. So district, or I don't remember, the levels that he said, but said district and upward. And in contrast, I think some of the researchers present work more with a group of schools or a school and then consider scaling up. And it was a little bit of a back and forth here in the discussion about the level at which RPPs should operate. And it seemed to me that, for example, in this last slide, when you were talking about the necessary ingredients and structuring and policies seem to exist at that higher level.
And yet things like shared goals, fostering here and now payoffs seem to me, maybe it's just my own interpretation, it seemed to me lie more on the working with a group of schools and these kind of more intimate level RPPs. And so I was wondering what your stance is and yeah, just your position on that issue.
Okay.
We can take a few questions if it's okay. יש עוד שאלות? Are there more questions? יש לך מיקרופון.
All right, then I'm going to type like cheat notes. Basically,
Yeah.
we got levels and
Beyond school.
scope. Okay, I'm just putting it in the chat because I might forget. Okay.
I join everyone thanking you. It was really very informative and made some order in a very complicated field. And my question also echoes our yesterday discussions about infrastructure. Again, in George's lecture yesterday, he mentioned that RPP is or should involve or must involve formal structure of operation. But when you describe infrastructure, it seems that it also accommodates some variety. So probably it can be more or less formal. I would like to hear your comments about it. Thank you.
Another question and then she will answer. יש עוד שאלות אולי מהשאלה. אז קודם ניקח מהקבוצה ואז ניקח גם מהצ'אט. אם מישהי
Hello, my name is Shachar. Couple of questions. One is I wasn't here yesterday, so I may not fully connect, but the two aspects that I raised from your lecture. One is regarding equity. How do we manage, if I put it this way, aspects of equity in terms of collaborative efforts and the award, if I may use that word, in terms of the outcomes that may be, and it's more clear in terms of the academic world and it's less in terms of the field. And if you could share some experiences or examples of that. The other thing is, I'm very interested in what you said about variety. There's always some tension, but I find myself feeling in terms of doing as many diverse experiences as opposed to some more clear-cut avenues that has been experienced and explored before. And so if you could just expand a little bit more about that.
All righty. Yael.
Hi, Suzanne. This was such a great talk. Thank you so much for, we had yesterday a lot of floating ideas and I feel now we have tables and it's all organized. So thanks for that. I think it will be very useful for us to think with these tools that you provided us with. I want to connect to a question that came up yesterday. There was a principal here. He's not here today. Principal, very, very busy all the time. And he said, I have so many pressing things on my table. And when I don't sleep at night because of these pressing issues, I don't say, oh, I need a partnership with a researcher. and my question is, we find that in Israel, we still don't have enough research practice partnerships, and that maybe the field and maybe also from the research, and not everybody feels the need for these partnerships. And we were wondering, as a group, how can we make this something that people will feel that they want to be part of in an equitable, if I connect to Shachav's comment, in an equitable manner that people will think, oh, this is something that I need that will support me.
Right.
Okay, Susan, that's all. I hope you will remember everything.
Yeah, jump in. Okay. So when it comes to, okay, I wrote my cheat sheet says we got level and scope of RPPs, formal and less formal, equity, and how to make this need compelling. And there were more details, and if we go back and forth, we'll get to more, but let me just tackle those in that order. And then we'll come back to the little details that I might have left out for now. As far as the level and scope of RPPs go, I think that my conviction is for sure that, you know, there's a lot of variety out there. So the guy who was saying above the schools, you know, across the different sites and so on, yes, I would say that's there for sure, especially in the network improvement communities. The people who were saying it's on the ground, it's small, it's direct, they're probably over here. Both are accurate, both are capable of doing lots of good. And that connects to the question that AIL just had of, you know, well, how do you create the need? That's pretty hard. And I tend just in life to be less of a salesperson and more of a celebrator. I just try to go out and figure out where are things working well and put that in the spotlight. And instead of pushing RPPs on people, it pulls people in. I would go, so one piece of advice is to work hard on this. I guess it's the soft sell. It's the showing people what kind of good can come. And there's two levels of that. There's the outcomes with the learners in the schools and, you know, achieving goals and all that stuff. But there's also just that participating in this makes me feel joyful, self-efficacious, like I'm good at what I'm doing, fulfilled. So there's a couple of different things that you could showcase. And then that comes to the formal and informal, and also the levels and scope questions. Maybe not all of this is happening all at once. Maybe you don't want to start off with everything all at once. You could start off trying to tell people, hey, this boat is so awesome. You want to get on the boat because where we're going is great. And I'll tell you more about it tomorrow, maybe. Or you could go find people who have been to Bali and say, hey, tell us about your trip to Bali and let's take the next step. And maybe that's only one of these things. So I guess for you guys as a working group, one of the choices is, do you want to go broad and try to accommodate every kind of RPP across the board all at once? Or do you want to start with the stuff that you've seen having success and build out from there? My advice is to at least start with what you have for success and maybe add on one thing just to, you know, seed it and try it out. But Jan van den Akker he's written about all kinds of interesting things. He was also my doctoral mentor. And one of my favorite sayings that I got from him is, we think big, we start small. And even in our national curriculum reform, which he helped lead, we still use that basic approach. So if there are people who are lobbying for this multi-site networked stuff and they have experience and practice where that's working, put it in the spotlight and see if other people gravitate towards one of those. If there's researchers in schools working with very small numbers, but having beautiful things happen, put it in the spotlight. If there's things in this list that you're like, never thought of that. Well, first of all, I would be shocked. But secondly, if it's not happening, that might be an interesting project right there. Why is that not happening? Maybe it's not happening because there simply is no infrastructure for a research alliance. Maybe there's no need for a research alliance. The idea that there's no need for anything usually comes from people not having an idea about what they do need. I mean, I don't have my phone in front of me, but otherwise I'd hold it up and say, see this thing, my mobile phone. I have videos from 15 years ago where people were like, a cell phone, what would I need that for, right? So people decide that they need a thing, usually after they get insight into what it can do for them. And so making that accessible is the name of the game. That also, so yeah, that has to do with the need, making the need compelling. It also has to do with the level and scope, I think. Another question was about formal and less formal. I think that kind of relates to this piece. I also want to say that the infrastructure bits that I mentioned were not necessarily for the high level, very multi-site kinds of things. Whether you're working at the level of an individual researcher who's main boundary spanner between an NGO and a research institute, or whether you're in a large collaboration with lots of institutions and lots of leadership that meets together alongside teamwork that's happening on the ground together, there's always going to be aspects of routine, aspects of policy, aspects of culture and norm that affect the day-to-day business. I think that how formal and how not formal also depends on where you see the energy. So energy spotting and energy mapping is definitely, I think, a big part of what I would offer to you, is to go find people, a coalition of the willing, or even individuals who want to join this coalition of the willing, and let that spark out and reward the kind of work that you want to see, whether it's in money to do things, whether it's in recognition and promotion to be on the spotlight of the organization's newsletter, or to get a next step up in like a promotion in the job. Those are the ways to get people to start paying attention. And then as far as equity goes, I think that relates especially to who comes to the table. Oftentimes we have to, if we ask for volunteers to do stuff, that's great. That's important because we want people who want to be there. Sometimes that gets us a lot of energy and commitment. It doesn't always get us the variety that we need in order to make decisions or designs or plans or artifacts or whatever that are going to be good for everybody. So if you want to achieve equity, you're probably going to have to figure out some explicit routines or policies that will help you socialize that norm, reify that norm, make it concrete in the actual tools that you build, the work that you do. It won't usually happen by itself. So specifically, you might even want to appoint somebody in this column here who's keeping an eye on that ball and thinking about what aspects of equity do we especially want to be paying attention to, maybe some priorities for the short term and the long term, and what would that look like? What does paying attention to that actually look like? It starts with having faces at the table and voices being heard, but there's probably other ways in which it can play out. And you might have one equity officer who goes around and helps your different research practice partnerships. You could decide that no research practice partnership gets your seal of approval or your funding or your attention or whatever, unless it pays attention to that in a way that other people can see. That's another way that you can kind of softly steer things. I think those were the main points, but now I'm not sure if I got to some of the detailed points. So let me stop talking and see if you want to chime in.
I think, thank you very much. I think we will stop here, although there is a lot of things to discuss, and אתם יכולים להמשיך לפנות לסוזן כמובן. You can email Susan, of course, and continue the discussion. So I wanted to thank you very much for having with us and for your fascinating lecture and discussion.